I want to introduce somebody who had a much better vision for MOFGA and made it bigger and stronger than what it is today. And he has a much bigger vision for agriculture and the state and the country. And I think that's what he's going to talk about today. So I hope you all enjoy Russell Libby.
So I'm sitting for a variety of reasons, and one of them is that I have a pinched nerve in my back right now that shoots pain down my leg. So if I go like this, it means I'll be back with you in just a minute after that stops firing away. And Becky, I'm wondering if Eric told you that he doesn't like change before.
He was crystal clear about it.
Oh, good. As long as you're coming into it with your eyes wide open, because I think that would be a mild understatement of Eric's approach to life. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that. And he's done a lot of thises and that's, and it adds up over a stretch of time. So I think most of you know that I'm, as of a week ago Friday, I'm no longer the executive director. I stepped to the side to be, what am I?
Senior Policy Advisor.
Senior Policy Advisor. Thank you, Enid from Vermont, for keeping me on track here. And you know, in many ways, I'm going to be doing some of the same things that I've been doing, which is thinking about how MOFGA fits into the bigger picture, how we can have an influence, what do we need to do, what are the possibilities in front of us. But I'm not driving to Unity 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week like I did for many years. And when Eric talks about that larger vision, there are so many people who carried it and drove it. Bill Whitman way back, Ellis Percy, who's the one who went looking at site after site after site, and many others in this room who I'm not going to pick out tonight. I wanted to talk for maybe 20, 25 minutes, just where we are, what's ahead of us, what we can do to make a difference. And it operates at so many levels that I think there's a place for each of us. We don't all have to do the same thing. We don't all have to have the same kind of farm. We don't all have to think or agree on every issue. But in front of us are really some possibilities that are huge. The food system that we've been running under for the last, call it 40 years, really longer, is anything from anywhere, anytime. And you think about it, you go in the supermarket, it's the same food, it's the same kind of shelf layout, it's the same companies who basically control what's going on. The only dynamic is who owns the companies at any given moment. And the amazing appearance of Walmart in the food world, where I believe at this point they're over a quarter of the total food sales in the United States are through Walmart. Really? So just put your head around that, which means that when you're supporting people through food stamps, the SNAP benefits, over a quarter of the SNAP benefits in the country go through Walmart also. And if we really want to make a dent in how people eat, we're going to have to crack that at some point. We're going to have to figure out what is the alternative, how do we build it, how do we make it grow. The scale that's required of that kind of approach is so big. So under most recent President Bush, it seems like we're setting up dynasties, of different families. So most recent, Bush 2 in terms of the presidential dynasty here. Tom Dorr was his Undersecretary for Rural Development, and his strong belief was that the farm of the future was 250,000 acres under one operation. that it's going to take 250,000 acres to be a viable farm business, to be competitive, to be able to supply these big markets. And when you think about that, in Maine right now, that would be one potato farm, one dairy farm, and the blueberries and other stuff kind of off to the side. So yeah, maybe 5 farms. Yeah, fewer than that in terms of acres, but just in terms of our geography and what's going on. And I don't think that's the vision that we've all been working towards all these years. It's not the vision that I have. I don't think it's the vision that any of you have for the future. And if we're going to do something other than the Tom Door, Earl Butts, you name it, year after year we get variations on it, we're going to have to build it. Because nobody's out there saying, hey, rah, let's go build a network widely distributed of tens of thousands of farms across Maine and New England. It's up to us to do it because nobody else is going to be the advocate for that. It's also 50 years this year since Rachel Carson released Silent Spring. If anything, we've regressed in the last 20 years. We have great IPM programs for vegetables, for small fruit, but we've really intensified agriculture for the grain crops, which for many years were not at all part of this spraying regime. And now, between GMOs and the ramifications of it, the resistant weeds that are spreading across the Midwest, we're really in a position where we're using more pesticides than we did 20 years ago on acres that wouldn't have traditionally been sprayed. And we have to find a way to break that cycle. And it's a two-parter. It's farmers saying, we don't want to buy that stuff. That's an important part of it. But it's also consumers speaking up and saying, we don't want that. We don't want to eat that. We don't want to be part of that test, and finding our way through it. So what does it look like if we had something different? And sorry, sip of water. For maybe 3 years ago, I was on a plane with, actually Chris Colson was on the same plane. We were flying to Italy for a meeting of researchers and farmers from New England to meet with researchers and farmers from Italy. Yes, it was a junket. I enjoyed it immensely. But on the way, I was having a conversation with Brian Donahue from Brandeis University. And Brian was saying, we really can't imagine New England feeding itself. And I go, well, I don't know about New England, but I'm not so worried about Maine because already we produce more calories than we consume here. So I think Brian took that as both an insult and a challenge. And for the last 2 years, there's been a working group of about 6 of us who've been kind of parsing the numbers, trying to sort out what's possible, and looking at what it would look like if we produced 80% of our food in New England. Not trying to get to 100, just saying, okay, if we tried to produce 80% of our food, what would it look like? 50 years out, so we're not talking about doing this today. Tomorrow everybody's going to buy Maine food, New England food, and it's all going to be good. It's a long, slow process to change systems. And as we've been having this conversation, it's clear that the only way it happens is if there's a lot more agriculture in Maine. We figured we probably need another 4 million acres back in production in the region. But where are those acres? 2 million of those acres are in Maine. And 2 million acres spread across the state not touching the conservation land that's in forestry that's already been tied up, but trying to recover, reclaim the best of the land that's out there, the land that has just been growing back into trees because we really haven't had anybody to farm it. We haven't had anybody to care for it. We haven't had markets for it. Those are all the things that we're going to have to figure out and do because it's an important part of it all. And that ends up being all about relationships. I came in with Marianne last night, and we walked into the hall, and it's full of kids running around. And you think about not those kids necessarily as the next generation of farmers, the ones who are going to do it, although we all hope that some of them will be, and expect that some of them will be, but we think of them more as examples of possibilities that are in front of us. And right now, in the Journey Person program, we're turning out about 25 new farmers each year. The apprenticeship program has 150 to 200 people participating. There are a lot of people who don't go through either of our programs who just jump in, say, we want to farm, and make it happen. And over the course of the last decade, we've added over 100 new farms, primarily just through the Journey Person program. That's what's going to make a difference, is all of these connections that you're all building in these conversations, in these sessions, as we work our way forward and try to find who's the next farmer and what are they going to do. And as we've been going through the applications the past few years, first it was, I'm going to grow vegetables and sell them in Portland. I'm going to grow vegetables and sell them in Brunswick. I'm going to grow vegetables and sell them in Portland, and on and on. And the last few years, we're starting to see diversity. I'm going to grow ducks. I'm going to set up to be a duck processing facility. Things that they probably wouldn't have done if we didn't have a lot of people doing the first parts of it all. Sorry, I don't have your name, but there's somebody here who's custom grazing land, so he's got a home farm, and taking his animals and going to other farms and custom grazing so that he can have a bigger production base for his livestock without taking on all the capital costs of buying all these pieces of land. I think that you, collectively, all of you here in this room, are the people who are going to make this all happen. And on one side, we have the people who are going to do farmers markets and CSAs. And if we go backwards, 20 years ago, well, I used MOFGA's first year, 71. We had one farmers market in Maine. The Portland Farmers Market is 1780 or thereabouts it started. It has run pretty much continuously since. One of the oldest markets in the country. Made it through World War II. I talked to a farmer who sold there, and he and his siblings would load up their sedan and use all their gas coupons to come to Portland in the very shady Old Port and pop open the trunk, and they would have whole chickens from their farm. And I was like, protein? Wow. He said we did very well during World War II. But now we have the Wednesday markets jamming, the Saturday market, the winter market, another winter market. These markets are full. We're going to spill over and go to the next town. So all of a sudden, South Portland has a market. People are looking more broadly at how they're going to get there. I think we have about 120 summer markets this year and about 30 winter markets. And then there's a group of you who've been looking and going, I don't really want to go to market. once, twice, 3 times a week. I'd like the people to come to me. So farm stands and stores and the things that start to take us out of this Walmart world, try to start to take us to this place where all of us have our little special thing that we do that provide us a kind of a core of our income, and then we build from there outwards. And we need that badly. We need it because the economic system that involves money flowing all around the world is so tenuous. We could call it make-believe. We believe in it, so it is. But when people stop believing in it, and here's where there's a tremendous cross-politics shared experience, there are a lot of Tea Party people out there that we don't agree with on a bunch of issues, but on the idea of local economy, they are not all that far from where a lot of us are. And we need to find ways to have those conversations and to share knowledge and build relationships that take us out of the high-level politics of Washington. I don't know how many of you have noticed that the Farm Bill failed. It just got stuck and more stuck. And this spring, our keynoter from last year, Brian Snyder, and I organized a meeting in Baltimore of groups from around the country to talk about what is possible. What would it look like if we didn't have a farm bill? And we just said, these are our core principles, and build from our core principles, and worried about the farm bill and the dollars and all of that stuff second. We called it a call to farms. Katie Green from MOFGA also went to that meeting. Nova Vermont was there. Were you there, Enid?
I was there.
Yes, sorry. And we've started trying to figure out how do we change the tone of the conversation, because out of the $100 billion a year that goes through the Farm Bill right now, $60 billion of it goes for income support, SNAP, and related programs. Now we're down to 40. 10 goes straight up to commodity support programs. About 10 more goes to 10 billion, not 10 million, 10 billion more, goes to crop insurance and programs to kind of prop up the status quo commodity agriculture. And all the rest goes for all the other things, including a lot of good money for conservation programs and organics and all of this. But in a world where all of us are cautious and maybe even skeptical of the long-term viability of that whole system, what is it we think are important? So I'm just going to throw out a couple pieces that we're talking about, and because I think they're fundamentally what MOFGA is all about, and a lot of the other groups around the country who were there. You know, what would it look like if we said one of our core values is we want the water leaving our farm to be as clean as the water that landed on our farm, or cleaner. So we want farmers to serve, we want farms to serve as filters, as water purifying systems at the same time that we're producing. And we know that's possible because we know the best farms do that. We all have well-managed woodlots. So many farms rely on their woodlot as the bank of last resort. Things are falling apart. Well, get somebody in and cut the woodlot, and don't look too hard, and 10 years from now it'll be coming back again, at least in our region. high quality food for everybody. So what's it look like if we actually have this goal? And I was talking to Nate Drummond for a minute in the breakfast line, but Nate this year grew a big bed of carrots for the local food bank, and had a group of volunteers from the food bank come and harvest and wash and put them away. So maybe we're not in a position where we can write a check for a lot of money, but we're in a position where we can help a lot of people by being very thoughtful and careful about what it is we're doing. On a personal note, we've been big organic supporters for decades, 30 years longer, and I'm still critically ill. So what we eat isn't sufficient in a world that's polluted. So farmers also have to be vocal about the need for clean air, for clean water, for getting toxics out of our food system in every way possible. We can't say that's somebody else's job, and there's this perception out there that farmers are not environmentalists, and yet I know so many of you, and I know how you live your lives, and I know that's absolutely untrue, but there's a lot of hiding behind the farmer flag. So while we're having this small a Call to Farms gathering, the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance is using checkoff money to build a popular PR image of agriculture that, hey, whatever farmers do is good. And don't talk to farmers about changing practices unless you're a farmer. Whatever farmers choose to do is the right thing. And who's funding it? Monsanto is funding it. Checkoff dollars are funding it. Farm Bureau, all the big national commodity groups. And in many ways, that's the conversation that's ahead of us is, can we build a base of support, a support network for each other, but also a broad public support for this idea that we can do better. We're doing the best we can with what we know. But right now, most of the money that's coming from the federal government is working against us. And so we can't just say more for us. We have to say, this is what's important, and the money part of it is not the solution. The money part is just part of it. And the solution is really for us to be articulating very clearly what it is we want to be doing on our farms and how we want to make it happen. And I'm going to finish with one last, one kind of run through of MOFGA. We have such a strong base right now. I would say that our new farmer training programs are the best in the country. Thank you to Andrew and Abby and April, who I don't think is here, but also to all of you who have participated and taught and shared knowledge. But we have a lot that we've learned from one another, and we need to do more of that. We're not going to get by with 25 new journey persons each year. Eventually, we need to bring in and train a lot of people, and they're not going to all be people who've come to it from college. There's going to be high school kids who just don't fit in the high school world, but really, really are good with their hands. They know that they want to do something physical. They want to be in the dirt, and we need to help them find a way to do that. The financing system for agriculture and all of the infrastructure is teetering. Teetering partly because the Farm Bill is failing, teetering even more because there's really nobody out there who wants to fund the kind of agriculture that we're doing. So Slow Money Maine has been a real powerhouse in that sense of moving ideas forward, making things happen on the ground. But the scale is still not sufficient. I did a little scribble sheet one day a few years ago of, what do we need just to build the organic infrastructure in Maine over the next few years? And it was $20 million 4 years ago, I think. And a few of those investments have happened, but a lot more need to happen if we're really going to be successful long term. And I think we do, and I'm getting close. I think we do an extraordinary job of peer-to-peer learning, teaching one another. We need to build on that. But the door is open. It's as big as all of your dreams. And if I've been reasonably successful over the last bunch of years at helping MOFGA grow, it's mostly because I've been able to talk and listen to a whole lot of you and see what you're doing and share it with the next person and point you to you, and you make the connections. It's one-to-one, it's many-to-many, and it's how we're going to change Maine agriculture in the future. So thank you all. So I met I stood up also to thank all of you, but it was an invisible, really quick one. So.
Russell agreed to take a handful of questions. Anybody want to have some questions, stand up and speak loudly so we don't have to repeat them. That would be great. Who wants to bring something up, some issue to John?
Russell, don't you think that Maine should be the first state to ban GMOs?
Yeah, I've thought that for 20 years now, and so far it's been hard to get the legislature to move in that direction. What's interesting is that some of the Tea Party Republicans are kind of inclined in the same direction. So we may be able to build some non-traditional coalitions around that issue. On my things I didn't talk about is biodiversity. Spencer Atell at Two Loons Farm this year grew some gorgeous open pollinated corn for his cattle. He didn't get it in the ground until late June, and yet that corn looked better than most of the traditional corn that was being grown out there, GMO or not. And there's a lot to be said for living soil and good genetics, and I think one of the things we could do a better job of is telling that story. Hey, I'm doing this, it works. Come see, I'm doing this, it works. But yes, John.
Anybody else?
Actually, my representative, Deb Sanderson from Chelsea, is one of the Tea Party representatives that we got in 2 years ago, and she was just reelected over Lisa Miller. Lisa won every town except Chelsea by so few votes that when the Chelsea town vote was counted, Deb got back in. She wants to have a conversation about industrial hemp. I'm just going to stop there and say, there's a governor that's behind it, and the Tea Party, as you just brought up, they're on the same page as a rotation crop. I think some point we need to have the conversation.
Way in the back.
Some say that organic certification has been an amazing thing that's happened in the Maine movement, or that land bank universities now have programs in
So the question is, we've got support in various ways from land grants and other institutions. I think that's one of the things that gave MOFGA early credibility was Frank Eggert, who was dean of the College of Ag, was skeptical, did some trials, and then it wasn't skeptical anymore. And that changed a whole lot of the conversation in Maine 30 years ago. Yes, we need to be articulating our values. That's what the Call to Farms meeting was all about. But I think we also need to support those people in the existing institutions who are kind of inclined our way. And it's easier to support if we're all saying kind of the same thing. We're lucky in the sense that right now in Washington, Deputy Secretary Merrigan and others are strong supporters of a lot of our work. And yet, I don't personally have a lot of confidence that we're going to win out in the political battles in Washington over funding science from USDA, whether it's going to be GMO or organic. Organic will always get some. We're politically that strong now. But if we want more, we're going to have to be much more vocal and organized than we've been before. Because the forces, the forces that think biotechnology is the answer are very strong in those circles these days.
Yeah.
Hi, Russell.
Hi.
Maine has passed a bond to increase or improve some of our sewage treatment plants in the state and wastewater recycling. And I just want to hear your thoughts about the human waste drain on our fertilizer.
Well, in some ways I'd point to Eric if I were still his boss. But we MOFGA have been more inclined to think that recycling human waste makes sense than most organic groups in the country. But it's really hard when you contaminate the entire waste stream, cross-contaminate it with industrial waste, with materials that are wide household use. So we have to tackle the toxics problem in our daily lives if we're really going to be able to think about responsibly using human manure on our farms. It's one thing to talk about using the stuff from your own household. It's another entirely to talk about a waste stream that's clean enough so we all have confidence in it on a continuing basis. The place where I think it probably has the most relevance is when you're bringing a farm back. So if we're talking about 2 million acres of land coming back, you need fertility to jumpstart that cycle again. And I think that might be the fair place to start the conversation, the idea that you have a year where there is human or biosolids applied, and then you go through your 3-year waiting period, but it gives you a fertility boost to start your cropping cycle, start your nitrogen cycle. I think that would be a healthy conversation for all of us to be having.
Hi. You talked about scratching on a list of infrastructure that needs to be put in place, and I was wondering if you could share some of the things on your list.
Ooh. We're going to go way over time if I start going too deeply, but obviously missing are poultry slaughtering facilities, well-distributed livestock slaughtering facilities, scaled up vegetable processing, distribution networks. If we're talking about food moving from Maine to the rest of New England, we can't all get in a van and drive to Boston. We're going to have think about trucking and learn from the efficiencies that the industrial system has created while trying not to repeat all of the same mistakes that they've made through the years. Send an email to me and I'll dig out the sheet, and that would be easier than trying to remember it all right now.
How about one more? Right here.
My question is related to Glennon's. I wanted to know where you think the money is going to come from to support those investments for all that infrastructure and all this additional land, and connected, how are investors going to be turned on to this opportunity?
1 second. The Slow Money Maine group is really grappling with that. And there are two groups looking at credit unions. One for a Maine-only credit union that would really be up to $50,000 in operating funds as kind of the low limit. And another one that's looking regionally and trying to figure out if it's possible for a credit union to finance real estate. I think both of those are getting onto the right track. They may not be quite there yet. My rough number is if we could get everybody in Maine to do the equivalent of $10 a year into some investment pool, whether you want to gift it or deposit it or however you want to do it, that's enough to do the most critical projects each year. That'd be $13 to $15 million a year of money flowing. And if we had that, we could at least focus. Slow Money Maine is really focused on infrastructure as their corner. But there are all the other corners that need attention too. And I think the credit union possibility is really a powerful one. It's democratic, it's cooperative, and it gives us all a way to solve some of those problems.
Great. Thank you.